Deji, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and I'm sure you've been watching with keen interest everything that has been going down in Accra. So let's start with the sprints, right? No Nigerian won in the men's 100 meter and the women's 100 meters. Any surprises as far as you're concerned?
Yeah, as well as Wale. And I would say I'm not surprised because you would say this is our B team or our C team. There are some experienced folks there. Obviously, Shakiri is not a green on when it comes to competing. This is his second African Games. He won a bronze medal in Rabat 5 years ago, right? There was Raymond Ekevo who snagged gold then. Raymond obviously has gone down the drain. He's having issues with the US and he's not been able to compete for a year, right? But I mean, when you talk about our A team, definitely you have to put Favor Ashe in the mix. You also have to put likes of Shea Ogunlewe in the mix. These guys have been consistent alongside Shakiri. For Iseme, it's good to know that this man has been running professionally consistently for a while now, even though he seems like a late bloomer, kind of like Ferdinando Mayala. But he's at 30, you would realize this is someone that's had the zeal to improve. Now, the old good guys about the African Games is a large chunk of the people that are here are based at home or are running professionally on the circuit. So, but you find a situation where a large chunk of our very good athletes are running in college. And because of the NCAA indoors just finishing, as well as a situation where they're trying to get into the outdoor season, you don't see the likes of Gotsen Brume around. Ella, who has been running very well too in college circuit, is not around, and a host of others, right? That is the price we have to pay for the US developing some of our top stars. The fact that the college athletic circuits would have to retain them, just a few instances where the coaches will concede to them going to compete for Nigeria in the middle of the season like this. The only time they'll perhaps release them is during the Olympics. For people like Udodi, who is our flagship athlete, Udodi has been nursing an injury since last year. That's why he didn't compete at the World Championship in Budapest. He's still trying to get his his recovery phase as it is now. Ophili too has been having niggling injuries here and there. She's only competed once this year at 300 meters indoor meet. I think at the New Balance indoor meet in New York this year. She wasn't at the World Indoors, so I wouldn't have been surprised to know that she wasn't at the African Games, right? But professional, the likes of Chukwuebuka and Nekoichi has been consistent. Perhaps I would say after Tobi Amusan is the top pro that we've got when it comes to competing in the shot put. Is perhaps in the top 5 or top 6 in the world. So I had no doubt he was going to retain his title that he won first in Rabat. There is Shadil Molato, who also won bronze a couple of hours ago in the women's armor. There's also Chima Oyekure, who is also going to go for discus gold. Don't forget, Chima also won Commonwealth gold at Birmingham 2 years ago. So it's a mixture of everything put together, right? We are still an athletic powerhouse, but the fact that most of our top athletes are in college has swayed so many of our potential medals away. While I was talking about the Ethiopians, I'll tell you what, that they are so dominant and good in the long distance that all the athletes that won yesterday, you perhaps I'll say are C-class athletes, right? The likes of Elizabeth Gidey, Gotosom Gebrese. These guys are competing at half marathons for their teams, NN Running Team and Global Sports Communications, and they don't need to be at the African Games. Faith Kipyego doesn't need to come here for Kenya. Perhaps Mary Mora is the only top-class athlete for Kenya.
Sorry to interrupt you. Is it just a measure of just how low in terms of the pecking order that the African Games has come, whereby the top athletes don't necessarily have to come and compete, and why the likes of Athletics South Africa are currently having their own classics in South Africa right now, where the world-class athletes like Letsile Tebogo are currently competing? Is it just a measure of the fact that, the African Games no longer feature as prominently in the global standings?
You're absolutely right. You hit the nail on this edge, because it's insulting that they put up a schedule of a top African meets within the African Games. I understand that it got moved from August up until to March of this year. But regardless, I mean, we as the Making of Champions, we try to organize meets and we also look at all of the schedule and we want some of the top athletes to come and compete. Now, I understand the likes of Akani Simbine. I spoke to Ferdinand Mayala at the World Indoors and he was still contemplating. But just the mere fact that he would see that this is not something worth his while, it's an Olympic year. They need to prepare for the Olympics and they're having to make the sacrifices, right? And the African Games is almost not worth it. as a professional athlete, how much are you going to earn for winning top prize at the African Games, right? You need to pay your bills. And that's why I have my utmost respect for Tobi Amusan. She always shows up regardless, right? At the African Championships, at the African Games, she's a world record holder. She's at the level of Faith Kipyegon, Eloy Kipchoge. These are world record holders in their events, but Tobi still manages to show up every single time. Same thing with Chukwuebuka and Ekwechi, right? People might have their reservations about Favour Ofili, but it's not just a Nigerian thing. It's an African thing. It's a global thing. Some of the best sprinters in Africa, Ferdinand Omayala was the world African record holder in the event. Akane Simbine, who was a multiple African champion too, not showing up, being at the South African AKA Classic. Leslie Tebogo, who was the next big thing, not just in Africa, globally, competing in the 400 meters where his teammates were competing at the African Games. So it just tells you where it is in perspective, right? So you saw the South Africa hockey team not also competing, but you also have to look at it in perspective, right? The organization of the games itself, them moving in the calendar, athletes cannot plan well. I can tell you for free that a large chunk of them will still not be at the African Championships in June in Cameroon, because the Olympics is their priority. So it's just the reality. As it stands now, it's going to be a breeding ground for the younger athletes or the B or C class athletes as a stepping stone to better get to the top level.
Yeah, Deji, hope you're doing great right there in ATL. And I wanted to talk to what you said about the African Games and its dwindling fortunes, because I think that is important that the organizers find a way to ensure the African Games becomes a sort of a qualifier for the World Champs or probably for the Olympics.
I think of
yeah, exactly. Although I think it's poor planning to also have the Games in an Olympic year. But here's my question to you. Gina Bass is Africa's fastest woman as we stand right now with what she did at the African Games. Imada Leseme was still in Silesia, I think at the World Champs last year in Poland. So he's someone who's been around the block. It was in 2019 World Champs in Doha as well. But where do we stand in track and field? I know we know about Tobi Amusan, but where do we stand? What's our form like? What's our state of play going to the Paris Olympics? What are your hopes? What is your state of our form right now for track and field?
So the reality is our chances are very slim, right? Every athlete's dream is to compete at the Olympic Games, but ahead of that dream is also to win a medal. And to get there becomes more difficult as it stands, right? We celebrate Tobi because of what she's done as a world record holder, but I can tell you for free that she's the only contender for a medal at the Olympics, perhaps also Ese Brume. And it's sad to say that 2-3 years down the line, they still remain our major contenders at major championships, right? Tobi, because of what she was going through before Budapest last year, the World Champs, finished sixth. Ese Brume not only missed out on the medal for the first time, breaking her streak, right? Finishing fourth at the World Champs. And that was it, really. Udodi, who I'll tell you, as of 2021, was at the same cadets with Leslie Tebogo, Gotsen Brume, Favour Ashe, right? These guys were running in the 100 meters and 200 meters, running top level times. Tebogo has literally surpassed them. Now, yes, what happened? Gotsen Brume came to the United States to run for LSU. So his measure of progression would stagnate based on what his school wants in NCAA. He's still a talented athlete. Udodi has gone professional, but he's suffering injuries. Favour Ashe, the less said, the better for us. So we know what's going on with him when it comes to what happened with him at his school in Tennessee. At Auburn, right? So it's difficult to say, but in perspective, I would also put Ekwechi in that perspective, potentially also getting into the top 10 in the world in the men's shot put. Perhaps Chioma Onyekwere, but our chances are slim, right? But I would put it down to this. The investment we put in track and field is not, it's terrible, it's an eyesore. The sort of money that Tobi is trained to prepare herself for this, perhaps it's north of $50,000 every single year. We struggle to even find track to let our athletes compete, and that's conveyor belt where Deji Aliu winning the African Games 100 meter title when we hosted in 2003, competing as an home-based athlete, Mary Onyali, Chioma Okwara, These guys literally were doing it on the home soil, right? But you will struggle to even find track that will develop these stars, and they have to be shipped to the United States. That's the only solution as it stands now, right? So that conveyor belt has been broken, and hopefully, we set it right from developmental phase.
Okay, just finally before I let you go, so you painted a pretty gloomy picture, right? Most likely we're not going to win a medal in track and field at this Olympics this year. So just how key is the work that development companies like Making of Champions, how key is your work in developing these next generation of athletes in order to feed them into the system so that they can keep Nigeria's pride of place in global athletics? You've talked about lack of track, excellent track in Nigeria. I know you struggle for a lot of times to even get any decent track to hold competitions. I also know that you struggle to even keep the Nigerian athletes in this same system because you've been forced to ship some of the best of the cream of the crop to the United States into the NCAA system. So just how key is the work that sports development companies like Making of Champions, how key is your work in ensuring that this Nigerian athletics, basically in the sprints, doesn't die out?
So the realization that we can only discover them, that's what we can do at best, right? And despite the mitigating circumstances around not finding suitable track, the old school system, we organizing MTN Champs as it stands now, and making it similar to what's happening with the Jamaican high school champs, that's the popular champs. It's the realization that it's going to be different from the Jamaican champs. With the Jamaican champs, a large chunk of their athletes, once they're discovered and they're done with high school, they turn professional under the best of coaches. So you have the likes of Michael Frater, Stephen Francis. These guys have coached Usain Bolt, Coach Shelley Fraser-Price, looking at this next generation of athletes to train them. And they've got the University of Kingston, they've got the Kingston Stadium to do all of this. But we can't say that. I mean, you were in Abuja a couple of months ago and you saw the patches on our national stadium track. So where do you want the best of coaches to train them? Kudos to what Delta State are doing, right? Where they've got camp for some of these younger stars. But the whole aim of it is to ensure that they transition into the United States. But we are Making of Champions. We're organizing these competitions just to discover them. We've got a lot. And we as long as we've got a large pool of them, we would always be ahead of the likes of South Africa, likes of Botswana in that developmental pool, right? Oh, sorry, that discovery pool. Now, but the most important part is the developmental pool. And because we're shipping them to the United States, we will just have to work with the time plan of the United States. And the orientation that they get is also key, which is one phase that we are trying to sort out now. We have a pre-developmental plan, keeping them in a year in an athlete's house after discovering them, and letting them understand that it's not just track alone that can make you successful, or becoming a professional athlete can make you just successful.
A lot can also happen off the track as well, as like you mentioned regarding Favor Ashe right now. Yeah, so
absolutely. So some of the shenanigans that they do when they come to the United States has also derailed them, right? You're meant to come here as well as compete, study, take care of your stuff, and turn professional, but they go into all sort of things. So that's developmental phase in terms of training and exposing them to what to expect in the real world of track and field is very key. And that's what we take very important at Making of Champions. So ensure that aside them doing those stuffs, they also are well-formed athletes, professional. And that's why I've got my utmost respect for Tobi Amusan. She did that, spent just 2 years in college, right, at the University of Texas El Paso, turned pro, and we could see our growth.
We can all see the results now. Yeah, I know if I let you keep talking, you probably take up the whole show. But thank you so much.
The only person I can see that I can tell you for free that's on that trajectory is Udodi Onwuzurike, right? He just finished from Stanford, turned pro, even though for injury. But you could see that his path is clear for success. It's
very clear. Deji, I really have to stop you here, but thank you so much. Always a pleasure having you on the show. You bring a refreshing insight, depth of knowledge, and you're really well versed in this particular industry. So thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure having you join us on the show.